The air that evening was calm, almost suspiciously so. The forest around our campsite in the Rockies had gone quiet, as if the trees themselves were holding their breath. We'd just finished roasting the last of the marshmallows, and the glow from the campfire flickered across our faces. 5 friends, sharing stories beneath a vast sweep of stars. The air was thick with pine, and the faint sweetness of smoke. "This," I remember saying, stretching my legs toward the fire, "is the kind of night that reminds you life can still be simple." But just as the words left my mouth, I felt it. The sudden electric chill that runs through the woods when the weather decides to change its mind. Somewhere beyond the ridge, thunder rolled, distant, low, but unmistakable. At first we ignored it. Out here, storms sometimes skirt the valley without ever touching down. Yet the silence that followed carried a weight to it, a kind of pause before nature speaks its real mind. I saw the first flash of lightning through the trees, a silver blade slicing the dark horizon. A few seconds later, another rumble, closer this time. That's when Jake stood up, squinting toward the west. "That's coming this way," he said, voice flat. Within minutes, the breeze became a gust, scattering sparks from our fire. The temperature dropped fast, and the scent of rain filled the air. We scrambled into motion, grabbing ropes, checking stakes, pulling tarps. The peaceful night had turned into a mad scramble. The first drops hit like thrown pebbles, followed by a sheet of rain so sudden it felt like the sky had been holding its breath too long. "Get the food sealed," I shouted, fumbling with the cooler as wind whipped through camp. Our tents shuddered like living things in the storm. Jake and Emma fought with one that refused to stay upright, while I tried to weigh down the corners of another with rocks. The thunder came closer, louder, until the forest itself seemed to vibrate with it. We moved by instinct, yelling over the wind, slipping in the mud, laughing sometimes just because it was the only sane response to the chaos. The rain became a wall, hammering down with no sign of letting up. In that roaring storm, I caught a glimpse of something that would stick. We're trying to cover the fire pit first, but it was no use. One gust sent the tarp flying, and the flames hissed out with a wet sigh, leaving us in near total blackness. The only light came from the lightning, white and wild, flashing so bright it burned the silhouettes of trees into my vision. Jake yelled something about the food bags, and I stumbled toward the old oak where we'd hung them earlier. The wind made the branches sway like whips, and for a second I thought the bags were gone. Then another flash showed them still swinging there. But one had torn loose, dangling just a few feet above the ground. I jumped, grabbed it, and wrestled it free before the branch could toss it into the woods. By the time I dragged it under the tarp where Emma was crouched, both of us looked like we'd swum across a river. "Where's Mark?" Emma shouted, her face half hidden by rain-soaked hair. I glanced around. The storm had swallowed everything beyond a few feet. Then I saw his headlamp flicker through the downpour near the tents. "Trying to keep ours up," I called back. He was fighting a losing battle. His tent had half collapsed, one corner flapping like a flag. I sloshed through the mud to help, grabbing a pole just as it threatened to snap. Together, we jammed it back into place, our fingers numb and slick. The storm roared its approval, throwing another burst of wind that nearly took the whole thing down again. By the time we got it secured, lightning struck somewhere far too close. The flash turned everything white, and the thunder hit before I could count a second. The ground itself seemed to thump beneath us. "Everyone in the trees!" Jake shouted, his voice barely audible. We left the tents and huddled beneath a thick cluster of pines where the wind broke slightly. Water poured down our jackets, and the smell of ozone and wet bark filled the air. It was a strange kind of fear, sharp and exhilarating at once. Every nerve screamed that we were small and foolish to challenge something this big. Yet, as we crouched together in that downpour, laughing between thunderclaps, there was something else too. A raw joy in the fact that we were still here, still holding on. In the chaos of the storm, we were no longer just a group. Dare move. The thunder crashed again, so loud it made the ground pulse beneath us. "Think this'll pass soon?" Emma asked, her voice half a laugh, half a tremor. None of us answered right away. I wanted to say yes, to sound calm, but even I could hear how the wind was still building. It came in waves, gusts that felt alive, whistling through the branches and flinging mist in every direction. Then, through the din, we heard a sharp crack, like a rifle shot, and the unmistakable crash of a falling limb. It landed maybe 20 feet away, close enough that we all instinctively ducked lower. The air filled with the smell of fresh split wood. Mark was the first to break the silence. "All right," he said, shouting to be heard. "We can't just sit here hoping this quits. Let's check the tents. If they're gone, we'll use the tarp as a lean-to." Practical as ever, even drenched to the bone. We crawled out from under the trees, keeping low, and made our way back toward camp. The rain came in sideways now, stinging like needles. My boots were heavy with mud, each step a small battle. When we reached the clearing, I stopped short. Our campsite looked like the aftermath of a small war. Jake's tent had collapsed entirely, its poles bent like paper clips. Ours was still standing, barely, but water streamed down the inside walls. Sleeping bags floated in puddles, flashlights half submerged, the cooler tipped on its side. The tarp we'd tied above the cooking area had torn loose and was tangled in a bush. Every bit of order we'd built that afternoon was gone. Yet, oddly, none of us panicked. We just stood there for a second, blinking through the rain, then set to work. We retied lines, restaked corners, and spread the surviving tarp between two trees to make a dry space. Well, dry-ish. It wasn't much, but it gave us somewhere to catch our breath. When I finally looked around, faces streaked with rain and mud, I realised everyone was grinning. Not because it was fun, it wasn't, but because there's a strange satisfaction in fighting the storm and refusing to give in. Mark lifted his arms, showing off his soaked flannel shirt clinging to him like seaweed. "Guess I failed that test," he said. His grin, wide and stupid in the dim light, made us laugh harder than we should have. It felt good, like shaking loose some of the fear that had hung around us all night. The fire pit was a shallow pool now, the ashes floating like grey petals. Still, I couldn't help trying to coax a little flame from the driest twigs I could find under the tarp edge. Every spark fizzled out instantly, but the effort warmed me in a different way. There was something grounding about the act, primitive, stubborn. Around us, the forest steamed, rain hissing off hot rocks and tree trunks, carrying the rich, earthy scent of pine and wet soil. The world felt washed clean, raw and alive in a way you only witness when you're truly in it. Emma leaned against one of the poles, her eyes heavy but calm. "You know," she said softly, "I think I like this better than the calm nights." We all turned to look at her. "Really?" Jake said. "You like feeling like we're inside a washing machine?" She shrugged. "No, I mean, when everything's easy, you don't remember it. But this'll stick." She was right. Even as I sat there shivering, I knew she was right. The wind began to ease, shifting from a roar to a sigh. I could hear the creek again, swollen but steady, murmuring somewhere beyond the trees. The worst had passed. We'd made it through the heart of the storm, and something in the air felt lighter, like the woods themselves were catching their breath with us. I looked around at our small, soggy crew and realised how much closer we'd become in just a few hours of chaos. The storm hadn't broken us. It had bound us tighter. By the time the clouds began to thin, the forest looked like it had been reborn. Mist hung low across the ground, curling between the pines, and every leaf shimmered beneath a veil of silver droplets. The rain had dwindled to a soft drizzle, and the sky beyond the canopy glowed faintly with the first grey hint of dawn. We stepped out from under the tarp, still warmed, and the crackle of new flame sounded almost like applause. There was a calm pride in the work. No rush, no frustration, just quiet cooperation. We didn't talk much about the night before. We didn't have to. Every glance and smile said enough. When the sun finally broke through, it set the forest sparkling. Droplets on every branch caught the light, scattering it in 1,000 directions. The storm had stripped away the noise, the comfort, the illusion of control. And what was left was something pure. Standing there, wrapped in the smell of smoke and damp earth, I felt small but steady, part of something bigger and older than any of us. That night taught me something I've carried ever since. Calm doesn't come from the absence of chaos. It comes from learning to move through it together. We could have cursed the weather, packed up and headed home early. But instead, we stayed. We faced it. And when the storm finally passed, the forest gave us something better than a peaceful night. It gave us a shared story. One carved into memory by thunder, laughter, and the stubborn flame of friendship that no rain could put out.